Ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. Today we're welcoming Dr. Melanie Buhr Lawler here through the Badger Talks program, which is the Speakers Bureau for UW-Madison campus. Before we begin, though, a couple of housekeeping items. So we are live streaming this today for people watching at home, and it will be recorded you can all reference it after this presentation and for everyone else in the community to reference. So if everyone could take a moment, make sure your cell phones are turned off or silenced. That would be helpful, just so that it doesn't interrupt the presentation. If you do have questions, there will be a Q&A period after Melanie's presentation. So what she'll do is if you have a question, she'll just repeat the question so everyone at home can hear and then answer the question. If you need bathrooms, you would exit through this door. It'll be to your left down the hallway, the women's and men's. There's also a drinking fountain down that way as well. Okay? So May is recognized as National Speech Language Hearing Month, previously known as Better Hearing and Speech Month. So that's why we decided to collaborate with Badger Talks for this program. This month is dedicated to raising awareness about hearing and speech disorders, the importance of early intervention, and the role of speech-language pathologists and audiologists in providing care. So I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Melanie Buhr Lawler, who will be presenting on better hearing for older adults. Dr. Buhr Lawler's clinical specialties are diagnostic audiology and hearing technology for individuals of all ages. She is committed to providing personalized care and improving communication for her patients and their families. With 2 decades of experience as a clinical audiologist, Melanie has expertise in the areas of cochlear implants, hearing aids, and audiology evaluations. Melanie serves as the director of the UW-Madison's Hearing Aid Recycling Program, or HARP. Additionally, she coordinates Listen Up UW, as well as the Reach Dane Hearing Screenings and UW-Madison Occupational Health Hearing Conservation Program. Melanie joined the department at UW-Madison in 2010, where she finds great joy in mentoring future audiologists and speech-language pathologists. Melanie's previous clinic experience was in hospitals, including Boston Children's Hospital, the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary, and Froedtert-Kenosha Hospital. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Melanie Buhr Lawler.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here in McFarland, and I feel like I don't really need to introduce myself after that, but I'll just say a couple more words. So actually, let me just start by saying I'm here to talk about hearing and hearing loss, and I'm very flexible and open to questions. It does not bother me if you want to raise your hand and ask a question while I'm talking. I'll repeat it back, and then there'll also be time at the end. So if you have any burning questions in just a minute, I'm actually going to ask you for them because I want to make sure I cover all that information in the talk. I'm really comfortable with changing up what I plan to talk about today because I want to make sure I address any concerns or questions that you have. So my name is Melanie Buhr Lawler, as you heard many times, and I am an audiologist. How many of you have heard of what an audiologist is or does? Oh, so good. So I don't even need to explain that. That's why I'm here today. I work with people of all ages, and I have always done so with a brief window of when I worked only with children and then a few adults sprinkled in there. But for most of my career, I've worked across the lifespan. Oh. Uh-oh. There we go. Oh, yes. Okay, now I'm going to go back, hopefully. So I am a clinical professor and audiologist at UW-Madison. That's why I'm here. And I just want to say a couple words about where I'm coming from. So I was explaining this earlier. I work at a place called the UW Speech and Hearing Clinic, not to be confused with UW Health. It's very confusing because we have the UW in our name, but I'm actually part of the university itself and not a part of the hospital. So we have an active clinic at the university, and we also train doctoral students in audiology and master's students in speech language pathology in our clinic. So we see people of all ages for all sorts of different things: hearing, speech and language, cochlear implants, tinnitus, some specialty testing on children, but we're not at the hospital. So I just like to explain that because it is a little bit confusing. So I'm going to keep talking while I try to get it to forward. There we go. Okay, so I just want to get everyone's wheels turning while you're sitting here. You don't have to raise your hand, but I want you to think about if you know anyone in your life who has a hearing loss or a difference in hearing, or if you yourself might have some concerns or a known hearing loss, or if you know anyone who wears hearing technology like a hearing aid or even a cochlear implant, or even something that is implanted that helps vibrate the bones of the ear. It's a different type of implant. Or if you know anyone who has ringing in their ears or other challenges with communication. So I'm getting some head nods. So I just want to kind of get your brain going on the topics I'm going to be talking about today. So what I'll do is I'll start with some general information and some facts on hearing, how we hear, and the prevalence of hearing loss. And then we'll talk about some treatment strategies and other communication strategies that we can all use in our lives to make sure our communication is as easy as possible. Now, I asked you some questions, and I want to know right off the bat if any of you have any questions or things you'd like me to be sure to address today. And it's okay if nobody has any right now. Okay, great. So, starting with some facts, a lot of us think of hearing loss related to age, and that is definitely something that does occur as we age, but it actually is something that we see in children as well. So, as you can see from the slide, 2 to 3 out of every 1,000 children is born in the United States with a hearing loss. So, we have newborn hearing screening that actually came about in my career, that it became a law that all infants are screened for hearing loss. And based on that, we're picking up a lot of children early with hearing loss, and that funnels them into getting treatment to keep them getting the services they need and keep them on track with their peers. More children develop hearing loss with age for various reasons, and some of that school-age hearing loss statistic that you see, that 15%, can be related to things like ear infections or damage to the ears, and sometimes children develop permanent hearing loss as well. Now you can see that 1 out of every 8 adults has a hearing loss, and as we get older, just like a lot of things, the incidence or prevalence goes up. So 1 out of 3 people in the U.S. ages 65 to 74 have a hearing loss, so that's quite a few more. And then 1 in 2 people over the age of 75 has some degree of hearing loss. Now, I hope one of the takeaways from what I'm talking about today will be that there's lots of different ranges of hearing. No 2 people are the same, but just on the graph, if we're looking at hearing and just looking at it really antiseptically, 1 out of 2 adults over the age of 75 does have some degree of hearing loss. This is a little bit slow, so please bear with me. There we go. So I just want to spend a minute explaining how we hear. So you have ears, most likely, if you're sitting here, and most of us here are communicating orally. I might even assume that we're all communicating using speech and language, although some people do communicate using other methods like sign language. But if you communicate using your hearing, you're going to use this whole system and beyond. So we think about the outer ear. Maybe you can even think back to like 6th grade science. The ear itself is like a funnel. That's why when we kind of cup our hand around our ears, our hearing can improve a little bit. We're accepting more sound that way. So it funnels the sound waves that are moving through the air into our ear, which vibrate our eardrum, which is at the end of that tunnel. And then that in turn vibrates the ossicles, or the middle ear bones. We have 3 of them. If you think back to your 6th grade class, we have a hammer, an anvil, and a stapes. And so those physically move, which is really impressive. When I think about this, I'm continually impressed by our hearing system. And they actually vibrate. That snail shell is our cochlea, and there's some fluid in it. And the motion of those ossicles moving in correspondence to the sound in the world vibrates, which vibrates some little tiny hair cells in our inner ear. And I'm going to blow that up for you in a second so you can see it. And those hair cells accept that energy and change it into electrical impulses that travel along our auditory nerves to our brain. So it happens really, really fast. We have like 20,000 hair cells in our inner ear that are working super fine-tuned. Some of them are moving actively, and some of them are passively accepting the signal. And it's a pretty sophisticated mechanism that's happening extremely fast, changing the acoustic sound waves of the world into electrical signals that are traveling up to our brain via the nerve. So this is just a closer picture of that cochlea that I mentioned. That's where those tiny, tiny little hair cells live. And then attached to the cochlea, you can see there's these canals. They're called the semicircular canals. They look like those little loops that you're seeing. There's 3 of them. And that's actually our organ of balance. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today, but it's super integrated with our hearing organ physically. So they're linked physically, and sometimes they're linked in terms of how our bodies are feeling as well. But you can have issues with your balance without having issues with hearing, and vice versa. But sometimes there's pathologies or problems that can affect both of them. Oh, that one went really fast. Okay, great. So this is the cochlea, a cross section, so you can see it a little closer. And I just think it's truly amazing. As a side note, I'll just say yesterday I was filmed for this YouTube show for 3 to 5-year-olds that's based in Madison. And they had me explaining hearing, and I just got excited about it all over again, when I was explaining it as if I would to a 3 to 5-year-old, because I do think it's just so interesting. But I did not go into this much detail. So if you look at that blue circle, it's encircling the portion where the little tiny hair cells I mentioned live. And they are, like I said, extremely small, and they're in a fluid-filled chamber. So sometimes we think, I wish I could just get in there and see what's happening in the cochlea, see how those hair cells are surviving or what is going on in there, but we actually cannot. The minute that you go into that cochlea and you make a cut, or if you have to, it's encased in bone. And so if someone tries to go in and, make an adjustment to how things are working, it would completely eliminate hearing, or at least damage it, because the fluid that protects those hair cells and keeps everything happy in there would be released. And so it would damage the hearing. So really the best way to look at someone's cochlear structures is actually if they donate their cochlea or the hearing organ after they've passed away. So we can't really get in. We can make lots of tests and inferences and measurements, but we can't see those structures while our hearing is functional. And then most importantly, something that for a long time I think we didn't talk about a lot is that we don't just hear with our ears and our hearing organs. It's really our brains that are processing the sound. So there's a kind of famous audiologist in the world of audiology. She's famous, and she talks a lot about how the ears and the hearing system are a gateway to the brain. And that may seem really obvious to all of us because we're sitting here thinking and processing the sound. But for children who are born with hearing loss, it's something we talk a lot about with families, because a lot of times if you are a hearing family and you want your child to learn how to hear and communicate using technology, it's a part of the conversation that we have to give access to that sound through the technology, and that opens that door or the window to the brain, so the brain can use that signal. So it's really the brain that we're working with, and I'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about technology, but some of what we have to do when we start to use hearing technology is help our brains learn to listen, again, in a different way than what we're accustomed to. Okay, so has anyone heard the term sensory neural hearing loss before? I'm seeing some head nods, or I've heard it called nerve hearing loss or permanent hearing loss. So there's 2 primary types of hearing loss. And this is all the background in terms of what I'm going to talk about later with strategies and technology. And I get a lot of questions about, well, could it just be earwax, or Could it be a problem with my eardrum? And so a lot of the testing we do in our clinic helps decipher what type of hearing loss is happening, where the problem is occurring. And the different types of hearing loss have different treatments. So I'll talk about that now. So the conductive hearing loss is a problem with the outer ear, which is the outside of the ear all the way up to the eardrum, and or the middle ear, which is that section, excuse me. I'm going to just step away. I'm going to point to it. It's the section with those bones that I talked about. So the name, I think, is a really good name. It means sound is not getting conducted through that portion of the system like it should. So what does that mean? Maybe it means you have a hole in your eardrum. Maybe it means you have I don't know if you've ever heard of fluid in the ear or ear infection. That happens a lot with kids. Both my kids had lots of problems with that. And so if there's fluid in your middle ear space, the part that I pointed to, sound just will not get conducted through the way it should. If you put an earplug in your ear or earmuffs on your ear, like if you mow the lawn or drive a tractor, that gives you a conductive hearing loss, essentially. Sound just is not getting conducted through. Now, with the exception of the earplugs and the earmuffs, most of the time that conductive hearing loss requires medical treatment by a physician. So if you are walking around and you have some sort of issue with your ear, with a conductive hearing loss, that is the type someone like me would refer you to, sometimes to your primary care if it's something that is kind of a quick and easy treatment, and often to an ear, nose, and throat specialist or an otolaryngologist so that they can take a look and see if there's some sort of treatment that can be done. And then many times that hearing loss can be resolved. And so then you'd make sure that it improves to the degree that it should and go on with your life. So that is the treatable type of hearing loss most of the time. The other type of hearing loss is much more common, and it is called the sensory neural hearing loss. So that is the type that's permanent, and it's the type that happens if you're exposed to lots of loud noises. It can happen with one extremely loud noise exposure or a lifetime of noise exposure. It happens just naturally to almost all of us, like the statistics I was sharing, as we age. So most of us in our lifetime are going to start to develop a little bit of sensory neural hearing loss, and some more than others. And then some of us are born with genetic hearing losses, or we are born with a genetic predisposition that can cause that over time. And then there's also some other disorders or pathologies that can cause this type of hearing loss. Now, I'm saying that it's permanent, but that does not mean it's not treatable. That just means there's no pill or surgery or procedure that's going to resolve it and make things just go away on their own. So it's very treatable, and I'm going to talk about technology and strategies, and it's very common. It's just not the type that will be completely resolved with medical treatment. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so I've used this slide for a while, and I had a student help me with a talk a while back, and I asked the student if she knew what this was, and she did not. And I think it's such a cool radio. So my analogy is a little bit dated, but it makes sense to me. So when I think about a conductive hearing loss, the type that's treatable that I explained first, when I think about that, it's like there's a radio and it's just turned down. So either you have your treatment and it turns the radio back up and the sound quality is good, or you can get a hearing aid and the radio just gets louder again because the hearing aid amplifies the sound. So imagining the hearing loss is related to the radio. Now, if it's a sensory neural hearing loss, if you have a family member and they wear hearing aids, or if you know someone or yourself, you experience this, and you wear a hearing aid, but sometimes the sound is not clear, even if it's amplified properly, that is a challenge that can come with sensory neural hearing loss. So because of the fact that that impacts those inner ear structures, which I should mention, so a sensory neural hearing loss is in the inner ear or the hearing nerve. So that those structures are affected. So even when we amplify sound, it can be quite good, but there might be situations that are still challenging that require some additional strategies, sometimes additional technology. And that's the part, I don't know if you remember I said hearing loss is very individual and no two people are the same. You could have the same graph of your hearing as the person sitting next to you, but the clarity might be different between two people. So hearing aids, the same exact technology might sound a little bit different for you than it does for the next person. So if you're thinking about technology, it's a very individualized decision. I'm going to give you a lot of general information and some tips about technology, but just know that no two people have the exact same world experience and no two people have the exact same hearing experience either. And some of that is related to the fact that sensory neural hearing loss can impact our clarity of sound in different ways. And that's something that we test for as audiologists, and we're really aware of it, and we will try to work to optimize that clarity, because that's like the biggest challenge. Oh, I didn't even conclude my radio analogy. So the reason I have the radio is that with the sensory neural hearing loss, I mentioned before with the other type, you could turn it up and it's kind of back to where it was. With the sensory neural hearing loss, your radio is just a little bit off the station. So you can turn it back up, but it might not always sound perfectly clear, and sometimes it might be trickier than others to understand speech. So now I'm going to transition into talking about what we can do. How can we help? Hearing aids, other technology. So I saw some people kind of nod their heads when they were thinking about hearing aids. Maybe some of you even have some. Maybe you wear them, or maybe you don't. And so I'm going to share some general information, and then I'm happy to generally answer some questions too, keeping in mind that some of it is pretty individual. Okay. So, do any of these look familiar? Yeah. Yes. Hearing aids. First of all, I like to dispel some myths about hearing aids. And one of the myths I hear, maybe just misconceptions is a better word, is that maybe they've heard from someone who's experienced a lot of challenges with their technology for one reason or another, that they don't work. And I'll say that hearing aids really do work when they're fit appropriately and when they're the appropriate choice for the user. Now, there still might be some challenges in some environments, but they really do work. They come in all shapes and sizes. So one of the other misconceptions that I hear a lot is that people, and maybe less so now, I think there's more marketing, but still true to an extent, I'll hear that people think the tiny ones on the right side, that those are the kind of the high-tech fancy hearing aids, and the bigger ones, or the ones that sit behind the ear, maybe are lower technology. And that's actually not the case at all. Interestingly, you can pack more technology and features into a bigger case. So if you think about it, hearing aids these days, this is not when I started. When I started, they were very different. But hearing aids are just little computers. They're computers that intake sound, process it, amplify it, and then pass it into the ear canal. They don't change the hearing itself. So if there's a sensory neural hearing loss, we're working with the individual and what's there, but they're amplifying the sound in a really personalized and specific way so that they are providing what is missing in the way that they should. And in addition to that, there's other features that I'll talk about in a second that can try to help in different environments. But you can get more features in your computer or your phone if you have more memory or more space. And so actually you can get more features in many cases on a larger style hearing aid. But that's not right for everyone. Everyone's really different. And so when I'm talking to people, I always try to find the balance. What motivates you? What are you going to wear? What do you want to physically have on your ear? Because you're the person that has to wear it, or your family member or friend throughout their day. And I want something much better to spend money on something that you're going to use than that's something that will sit in a drawer or in the case and never be taken out. So there's a wide variety of technology, and a wide variety of style. So this is the style. And there are some reasons you would go with a bigger style in addition to the technology. So the ones kind of in the middle, the behind the ear, those are really good when you need a lot of power. So if you have a really significant hearing loss and you need a lot of power, that's the best choice. And then we usually do those for kids. We always do them for young children because they're growing so quickly. And then the invisible in the canal, all the way on the right, really the only reason you do that is for cosmetics. It will help, but there are some sacrifices that you make, and you're also pushing it way down into your ear canal. And what happens in your ear canal? Earwax. So you're pushing it right into your earwax, and the batteries are very, very tiny. Those are not rechargeable. So there are some trade-offs, but if that's the one you're going to wear, then that's the best choice for you, as long as you can manipulate it. One thing that I also have seen a big change in recently, and this is mostly in the bigger styles, that's not really available in the tiniest styles yet, is that they have, in the last probably 5 years, they've all really moved to being rechargeable. So I still have people that prefer batteries just for personal reasons, but I would say 9 to 9.5 people out of 10 go with rechargeable these days, because nobody wants to fool around with batteries if they don't. Well, most people do not want to use batteries if they don't have to. And most of us are getting accustomed to charging things now. Like at night, we'll plug in our phone or our computer. And so that's what you would do with your hearing aids at night, is you just place them on the charger instead of putting them in a case. So that's a big change I've seen. And they started before 5 years ago, but in the last 5 years, the lithium ion batteries that are in the hearing aid cases have gotten much more efficient. And so they're lasting all day long. They don't die throughout the day, and people really like not having to change them. And they also have made the hearing aids more water resistant, because there's no space where the battery would go in where water can get in, so they can keep the case a little more tight around them. Before I go to the next slide, does anyone have any questions about the different styles? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the receiver and canal, you still put something in your ear,
Yeah.
but it's not as deep, like you said,
Yeah.
compared to the one on the far right.
Yeah, okay, so that is a really great question, and I'm going to repeat it for the live stream. So a receiver in the canal hearing aid, I'm really glad you brought this up, because this has moved to be the most popular type of hearing aid. And the question was, do you still put something in your ear, but it's not as deep? Yes. So I wasn't completely clear. Every single hearing aid of this kind, you have to have something in your ear. So there's always got to be a way to get that sound in there, those sound waves that are amplified to that eardrum. And so the receiver in the canal, it is different from all of the ones that are behind the ear, because it has a little speaker in the ear. It actually has a little piece of electronics in the ear. And then maybe you've even seen people with it. There's just a tiny little wire that goes, and then there's a piece behind the ear. The behind the ear use a tube with an ear mold. It's a piece of plastic. And then the ones on the right side, those all have the electronics all in the ear. So that's a really good clarification. Thank you. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, partly. Okay, so obviously you got to have another one plugged in the other.
In both ears, typically, yes. Good question. And so, again, this is over time. There's really good research that shows that we always hear better with 2 ears over 1, and especially for hearing in noisy environments. So if possible, we try to fit people with 2 hearing aids. There's some times where there's a reason that is not physically available to them, but we know that people will hear better in noise, hear better, like if someone calls their name, to know what direction they're coming from. So yes, you'd have something in both ears. The receiver in the canal, if you've got good hearing in some of the lower pitches, it can be really nice because we can keep your ear pretty open. So some of us develop hearing loss in the higher pitches with still good hearing in the low pitches. So then it can really just seem like I hear people, but I don't always understand what they're saying. And that might be a high frequency hearing loss that's showing up because you can hear that sound if someone's looking right at you. You can hear everything they're saying, but if they turn their back or they move to the next room, or if it's noisy, it could be really tricky. And so that one on the left can be really nice because we can keep that natural hearing that you already are accessing in that case, but we can amplify some of those higher frequency sounds. as we move to some of the ones on the right side, we do end up covering up the ear a little bit. And I don't know if you've ever talked with earplugs in or your fingers in your ears, but it can make your own voice sound kind of echoey. And that's not, some people do get used to that, but it can be one more hurdle that we have to overcome. So the receiver in the ear has gotten quite popular for a number of reasons, and its rechargeable options are available in that style predominantly. Go ahead.
I haven't seen anything up there that mentions molds. Or
Yes.
actually molds to the ear canal, I guess. What are you finding with those? Are they helpful? Are they not useful?
Yeah, great question. So the question was about ear molds, and that's clearly from someone who knows about technology a little bit. So thank you. I'm really glad you asked that. So the ones in the middle, the behind the ear, all have to have something called an ear mold, and that whole thing is a plastic piece with a tube. So sound comes out of the computer, the hearing aid, down the tube and into the ear. You can get an ear mold for the receiver in the canal that provides a more customized fit. Some people really like that because it can help with retention. If their hearing aid, they're worried that they're going to fall out, or if they have an ear where maybe a non-custom version doesn't stay in very well. So that's a really good choice in that case. Some people like the soft domes because they're kind of squishy and they're very forgiving. So there isn't like when you put on your shoe, it has to go on one way and on the right foot. And the hearing aids have to go on the proper ear, but you can put them in all sorts of different ways with a soft plastic piece. With a mold, it's like a shoe. It has to go exactly in the right spot. Oh, my heavens. Ben, I think I need you. I touched a button. That's a really, great. Thank you. Can you forward to the picture of the hearing aids? Thank you. Wow. He's behind the scenes. He is the man behind the curtain. Go ahead.
Just as a follow-up to that, I've had the soft mold.
Yeah.
The soft rubber piece. And I've noticed that if I put my finger in my ear, I can hear so much better. Is that because I need a mold, or what's going on?
Yeah. It could be a couple reasons. So I would tell your audiologist that, because when I hear that, I think maybe it's not sitting in your ear in the right spot, so you're pushing it in and it's changing the angle, or maybe you need some more of that low frequency sound that the soft plastic piece lets some of that out, so you're providing a little more of that. So you might want to pursue that, or just talk to your audiologist about if that would be a good match for you. Because you should be able to hear well kind of optimally without having to fiddle with them all the time. That's the goal. We don't want you to have to, it's kind of put them in and forget about it. That's what we would hope for. So that's a really good question to bring up. I have one more thing to say on this slide. It's going to lead into the next slide. So when I'm talking to people about hearing aids for the first time, I'll say you have two big decisions to make, and hearing aids are expensive. So these are big decisions. One is what they look like on the outside, and that's why I started with that. It's really easy to see, it's visual. And then the other is how they work on the inside. So I've already said a couple times that they are computers on the inside. And and I think about them like, I use the analogy of a cell phone or a car, or even a computer itself, in terms of the fact that you can get the highest technology, and I said this already, in the biggest hearing aid and the lowest technology in the smallest hearing aid. So the decisions are independent for the most part. And the part that affects the cost, that is the technology. That's the computer on the inside. So it's not, at least in our clinic and in most clinics these days, it's not what they look like. It's the computer on the inside. So two separate decisions. And that's something I think is really confusing, and it would be confusing to me if I didn't do this every day. So you're picking what they look like, and you're picking how they work. And how they work it's the money part. Now, this is a rough estimate. I think I got it on the internet. It's just to give you a good guideline of the fact that there are different levels of technology. Again, you can think about it like when you buy a car. I just had to buy a car because my other one was about ready to die. And you can buy a basic model that gets you from point A to point B. Very nice, all the warranties, new, but maybe you don't have the heated seats or the sunroof. Does everyone need those things? definitely not. Some people would never even use them. But do some people really want them, and would some people use them? Yes. So this is where it gets really personal, and I always tell people it's between them and their wallet or their pocketbook. And it has a lot to do with the features that are in the hearing aid and then the lifestyle you need. That you live? Do you need all of those features? Because so I try to talk to people about getting what they need and what makes sense for their budget, but not paying for features that they might not be utilizing. So go ahead. Yeah, it's kind of squishy. At our clinic, I would say their prices for on the low end, probably for one. Yeah. So hearing aids are really expensive, and I'm talking about prescription hearing aids. I'll talk about over the counter in just a second. So prescription hearing aids are fit by someone like me, an audiologist. There's also hearing instrument specialists. They have a different training level, and they work with hearing aids. We go to school and kind of do all the background stuff, and we do other things as well, and they do an apprenticeship and they fit hearing aids. Often we can be in lots of different settings like schools and clinics and hospitals, and they are in typically a private practice environment, more like a sales environment, which is okay, but it's a different background. So yes, those are kind of general prices, and they're going to vary a little bit from clinic to clinic, so that makes things very confusing, I think, for the consumer. So my goal is to help. I don't make commission. It's okay if I did, but I don't. And I want to just educate you so you go in eyes wide open if this is a decision that you'd be making, or a family member or a loved one. Yeah, go ahead.
Does Medicare cover the cost of them?
I wish. The question was, does Medicare cover the cost of hearing aids? Since I've been an audiologist, almost 25 years, we've been advocating for that, and Medicare does not. There are some secondary insurances or private insurance that will have a benefit, or they'll work with like a third party. So maybe your insurance, maybe you have a supplement or a secondary that says, well, we don't have a benefit, but you can go through this third party and you get a discount. So that they're doing that a lot more. I'm seeing a head nod now. But no, Medicare itself doesn't. And there's been lots of bills introduced, and they're not really inclined. For some reason, they haven't been really inclined, even though so many seniors could benefit. So I guess the take home that I want you to see on this slide is that there's different levels of technology, and they're all good. That's what the thumbs up mean. There should be a thumbs up by basic too. So every single level of technology is going to help you hear better. And the research shows that in a quiet place, one-on-one especially, they're going to all sound the same. So if you live a quiet life, and all of you are here, so you go out and about, but if you're at home in a quiet environment, and you don't ever go out and about, you're not in crowds, you would be paying for a lot of technology that you wouldn't be using if you kind of just hang out at home, watch TV, maybe talk to a family member. Any level would be probably equally beneficial to you. As you go up in cost, just like with your car or your cell phone or your computer, you add more memory and more comfort features. And that is where you start having to pay more money. It's the same case. It's the computer on the inside that has more features added. So the question I always get is, well, what do you exactly mean by that? And I'm just going to give you a kind of a general overview. And then if you go in, you'll have information to ask more questions to the audiologist that you see. So as you go up in technology, you can start to add more noise reduction features. So hearing aids are really smart. They're not perfect. And noise is really hard because some of the noise in the world sounds just like the speech we want to hear. So like if we're in a party, they have a really tricky time figuring out if I want to hear you or if I want to hear you, if you're both talking at the same time. But they use other cues now, like where our bodies are positioned in space, how our heads are moving. When you go now to the higher end, this is both interesting, useful, and a little bit weird for me at this point in my career, and that they're starting to incorporate AI. So that doesn't mean they're taking your data unless you want them to, but they are using the data out there from the world on listening environments, and they're trying to be really smart about the decisions they're making for what signals they're getting and what they choose to amplify. You usually have to pay, those are usually on the green and the yellow right now. So they're making smarter decisions, but you have to pay for the super smart decisions at this point. Now that could change with time. You also can add on the higher ends more echo reduction if you're in really echoey places, fancy automatic music settings if you love to go to overture or to concerts or if you're a musician. So that this is a general overview, but they can be quite personalized and quite automatic. Now you can get some of those features on the essential or the basic. We call it standard, not essential at our clinic, but on the standard, the basic, but they tend to be a little more manual. So you might have to manually adjust them or change a setting in your app, which is something I'm going to talk about in just a second. But does anybody have any questions? Okay. Whoop. There we go. So I gave this talk a while back, a similar talk, and there were a couple people that said, I do not ever want to use my cell phone with my hearing aids, and I would never make anyone use their cell phone with their hearing aids, but you can now. And all those levels that I showed you, every single one is compatible with cell phones now. So it used to be that it was different. Now they're all Bluetooth compatible. They're all compatible with a cell phone. Every single brand has an app, and you don't have to use it if you don't want to. But what it means to have an app is that it's like a remote control. So if you want to change the settings or adjust the volume, you can do that with your phone. The one thing I've seen a lot of benefit from is people who have a hard time hearing on the phone or hearing like their music. If they like to listen to music through their phone or watch videos. And in most cases, you can set the phone calls to go straight through the hearing aids, and it can really improve hearing because it can be amplified and go to both ears. And I've seen people's lives really change who had a lot of struggle hearing on the phone. So that can be a good benefit if that's a challenge for you or a loved one. So they're all smartphone compatible, and you don't have to pay more for that. And they used to be more compatible with Apple phones, but now they're really compatible with all brands. So really quick, I'm not going to get into a ton of detail on this. I'm keeping an eye on the time, but there's other devices. So sometimes hearing aids aren't enough, and there's other technology we're going to talk about in a second, but sometimes it's a struggle, and noisy places can still be hard, even with the fanciest, best fit hearing aids. And so there's other technology available that can help in noisy places, like a microphone that your partner can wear in the car, or a loop. I don't know if you've ever seen that little symbol, like if you go to a lecture hall or a place of worship, you could maybe tune in that way or wear special headphones. So there's lots of other assistive technology that's out there as well that can work with or separately from hearing aids that can really improve people's lives in certain situations. Now, that's not for everyone. I have some people say, I would never hand a microphone to someone. And so then we look for other solutions. Okay, I actually want to go back to hearing aids really quickly and just mention over-the-counter hearing aids. I had a slide in here on that, and it had some outdated information, so I took it out. But I just want to acknowledge that you can buy hearing aids now at Walmart, and they are hearing aids. It used to be they were not called hearing aids. They were personal amplifiers. You could buy them at like Cabela, and they were sold for deer hunting. And now they're actually selling hearing aids that have some of the similar features to the prescription hearing aids I was talking about. Some of them are fit with like a soft piece and go in the ear. Many of them are that receiver in the canal or ear style that you were asking about. It's a little bit like the Wild West right now. So they're FDA approved, they're available. There are some really good ones, and then there are some really bad ones. And they're not that cheap, actually. So you can pay upwards of like $1,700 each for them. Some of them are cheap. I would say if you're going that route, they are a great option. They have raised awareness. Our clinic is busier than ever because everyone is thinking about hearing now because they're like getting ads. But just make sure that you have a good return period. So if you buy a prescription hearing aid, there's legal aspects where you have to be provided with the return period of at least 30 days by law, and some places do longer. Prescription hearing aids, over-the-counter hearing aids don't have a legally mandated return period. So just make sure if you know someone who's about to buy an over-the-counter hearing aid, like online or at Best Buy, that they make sure they can return it if it doesn't work for them. Because the data is showing that there's a huge variety in terms of sound quality, fit, and patient satisfaction. And there's like not one perfect over-the-counter hearing aid yet. If there was, I'd be recommending it. So what I'm recommending is just go in eyes wide open and know great, try them. Treat them like reading glasses for your ears, but just make sure you can return them if they're not beneficial to you. Go ahead.
What do you know about TV ad, Joe Namath, MD hearing aids? They're like $300. What do you know about that?
I can't really speak to specific brands. I have seen research on that. I can't remember where that fell in like how the quality. And I do know that there's some research that shows there are some reasonably priced options that are good quality. I can't remember if that was one of them. And sorry, the question was about a specific hearing aid called MD hearing aids. But I know they target really heavily. They do lots of marketing. I had something else I wanted to share. I'll think of it. That's a great question, though. So there's a lot of them out there. Just, make sure you can return them if you're not happy. Go ahead.
What if you don't have an iPhone? How do you make the adjustment?
Yeah, that's actually what I was the question was, what if you don't have a phone? How do you make adjustments? And that is what I was going to say. So thank you. The other thing about the over-the-counter hearing aids, some of them you do need to have a phone to adjust, or you need to be able to learn how to use them and put them in. So that's another reason to know about your return period and how they're adjusted. So some of them, there's like little settings, like a switch, or you just buy, kind of a universal one. But some you do have to do like a hearing test through a phone. So that's another thing to take a peek at before you make a purchase. Thank you. That was what I wanted to say. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, kind of related question. Is there a good source of comparison between the brands of hearing aids so that you can understand, here are the advantages of Beltone and what they do well versus brand Y, Z, whatever?
Yeah, the question was, is there a great source of information so you can do your research like any of us do when we make big purchases? Like I just bought my car and I probably didn't do enough research. I was really fatigued, but I did do some. No, I'm sorry. There are you can look at like Better Business Bureau, Consumer Reports. I've looked at studies, like lots of studies. They're still coming out really heavily on over-the-counter, but again, it's like I said, kind of the Wild West. Related to like the prescription brands, that's a great question. So we at our clinic, we work with more brands. There's like 6 major companies that own all the hearing aids that are prescription. So they might label them under Beltone, but they might be this other company that like makes them and sells them at Costco and what have you. So there's no research that shows one brand is better than the other, which is so funny. And otherwise, I would only be working with that brand. We work with 5 different companies in our clinic the companies claim they're vastly different, but the research does not bear that out. Like performance is the same.
Do you know if the hearing aids you're familiar with and you work with, does each one have some functions that are better than the other? So if I said my hearing problem is X, you would say, well, you really would do best with this hearing aid.
Yeah, so the question was, are there some functions on some brands that are better than others, especially for like a certain person? And I actually would say a soft yes to that. What we do in our clinic, and this is going to vary from clinic to clinic, but we demonstrate hearing aids for people. So you come in, you have a hearing test, and then I say, especially if you've never worn hearing aids before, I say, well, let's let you listen to a couple different brands. And some people cannot tell the difference across brands, and we'll play background music. We'll take a walk outside. We'll, if you're a musician, I love working with musicians, and we'll have like their classical music playing. And we'll try them out in those environments and just see, or certain things I will recommend, and that will help make the decision. Other clinics don't work with as many brands. You typically get, 1 or 2, But that's still a great question to ask, is what do you think is best for my lifestyle? And if it's possible, it's really great to be able to listen to them before you purchase. But even if you can't do that, there's a return period on prescription hearing aids. Yeah. No, this is great. I'm fine with questions.
So there's two kind of technology-related parts of the hearing aid. One is the element itself. The other is the apps that interact with the hearing aid. And so my question is, with a number of these prescription hearing aids, are the apps all similar, or do some have much better apps with much better capability to adjust, and is that a deciding factor in your purchase?
Okay, the question was, if you're going to use an app, which you do not need to do, so some people don't want to use a cell phone or don't have one, and they can make the adjustments on the hearing aids. But if that's a priority, and I'm an app person, is one company better than the other? Now, if you would have asked me that a year ago, I would have said, this brand doesn't have a Find My feature. If that's a priority, we're not doing that if you think you might lose them. But, they're all competing. So when I say Find My, it's if you lose the hearing aids, then you can use your app to help you find them. It's like a game of hot and cold, and it shows you on a map where they got lost. And believe me, it can be very useful. But I don't think right now, as some of them do like a hearing fitness, there's one brand that does like a live translation feature if you're speaking to someone in another language. But other than that, I think that hearing fitness being like brain exercises, I don't know a lot of people that actually do that because you can do brain exercises in lots of different ways. Other than that, I think the apps are quite similar right now. But ask me again in 6 months and I might say something different when they do an update. That's a really good question, just like any app. Yeah.
In the app I use, for example, there's a lot of adjustments. If I'm outdoors or I'm in a restaurant, specialty adjustments for low versus high frequency. So I'm wondering if that's pretty standard.
Yes, so the question was, is it standard to have all of those specialty adjustments in the app where you can tune up different settings for different environments? I would say generally, yes. Some companies allow more than others, and some even allow you to create like an easy version and a complex version of the app, so then you can decide, do I want to have all those features, or do I just want it to act as a remote control and let the hearing aid make the decisions for me? So I would say most of them do have that. Some do more than others. You can even make like special settings. Say I go to a coffee shop every day and I always am making little adjustments. You can save that, and then some of them are so smart. You walk into the coffee shop and it says, hey, do you want to go to your special adjustments? And then you say yes, and it does that for you. So you can make them as fancy or as not fancy as you want. One of the things I tell people is, that's okay. You paid a lot of money for this technology. You can just let it do its thing. So yeah, really good question. Any other questions before I go on? I'm going to switch gears for like 2 minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
I know there's some companies out there that do free consultations, but I'm sure yours probably doesn't.
Well, so our clinic does not directly take most insurance because we're part of the university and we don't have a big billing infrastructure in our department. But we would, in many cases, we will do a hearing aid selection. If you're just coming and you're going to go somewhere else, then there is a charge, but we don't charge. We bundle that right now in with the cost of the hearing aid. Now we'll see, so you pay, and then you pay for your services with that. That's what a lot of clinics do. We'll see how, if tariffs start to affect our pricing, we keep asking the companies, and no one really knows where that's going. But right now, it's included in the cost of the hearing aids at our clinic. Different clinics might do it a little differently. That's a good question to ask, if you can do a consultation for free. We also, at our clinic, because we don't direct bill insurance, it's a long, complicated story, but we do not bill for the hearing test at our clinic. So you can come and have a full comprehensive hearing evaluation. You'd be working with a supervisor like me and a graduate student, and there's no charge. So I can put our clinic information back up at the beginning if you're hearing curious after this. I know I'm getting close to time, and I want to be aware of everyone's time, but I'm going to say a couple more things really quickly. Sometimes hearing aids are not enough. So hearing aids do amazing things. They open up a world of access. I was talking with someone 2 days ago who I had fit for the first time with hearing aids, and she was almost in tears talking about how she can hear the birds and her daughter in the car, and she hasn't heard her for a really long time, and it's truly wonderful. But sometimes the hearing system is to the point where hearing aids cannot help. And in that case, cochlear implants are a really good option for some people. If you lose your hearing and a hearing aid won't help you, this is a surgically implanted device into that snail-shaped organ, the cochlea, and it uses a piece on the outside called a processor. And it is like any surgery. It requires rehab and time and programming by someone like me. It's not a quick fix, so it's a journey. But within 6 months to a year, you kind of reach your peak, and it's an amazing way to restore communication for people who are unable to benefit from hearing aids. So cochlear implants are a great choice for people who hearing aids just can't help. But you have to be to the point where that clarity is not, we cannot give you enough clarity. So that's really the big deciding factor at this point. The criteria over the years has really shifted toward clarity issues, and then that's where the cochlear implant becomes the best solution for some people. And there's no age limit on a cochlear implant. Actually, you have to be 9 months old. But I think we're all okay in this room. Tinnitus, I know that was in my talk description. Many people with hearing loss have tinnitus. Many people with tinnitus actually do have hearing loss. There's no one quick pill or medicine that will fix it. Hearing aids can help. We have a tinnitus clinic at our clinic where we do some treatment options like a device and some counseling, and sometimes just simple solutions like running a fan, keeping noise in the background, maybe wearing a device that helps you. Those things can really make tinnitus more manageable, but it's a really common concern that we hear about and work with. And then last but not least, I talked about lots of things that cost money and involve devices, but there's a lot of things we can do that are free that can help us communicate more easily. Some of them are really simple. Like if we have a loved one who's having trouble hearing us, turning off the TV or the radio and looking right at them, walking into the room to talk to them, not starting with our back turned in the kitchen while they're sitting at the table trying to eat and missing half of what we say before we even started got going with the communication. So making sure you walk. I say in my family, if you talk, you walk. You go in and you look at the person and you talk to them and you have good lighting and you turn down the background noise. That can really help. And then for the person, if you have a loved one who's having trouble, just let them know it's okay. Just ask me. Or, instead of just saying what, maybe you can let me know what you don't hear. So instead of like I said, did you feed the cat? I heard you say, did you? But I didn't hear what else you said. Giving a little back can really help the frustration that can happen between communication partners. We hear a lot about that in our clinic. And I think, we're right at 2. So I've answered some questions. I don't know if okay, I can take a couple more questions. I know you're live streaming, so I don't want to go over. Go ahead.
Do you have to remove hearing aids like when you shower?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. The question was, do you have to remove hearing aids when you shower? So yes, you do. But in my career, they've gotten so much more water resistant that if you accidentally go in the rain or in the shower, they're probably going to be fine. When I first started, it was kind of like, now we have a repair. But yeah, you have to take them out in water. There's some that are quite water resistant, but still you are going to want to take them out if you're going to get really wet. Yeah, go ahead.
What about listening on the telephone?
Telephone. Yeah, so if you use a cell phone, it's nice to be able to send the sound to both ears, like through the phone, like if you can pair them up with the phone. The landline phone, some of them do have a feature that can communicate with hearing aids. One thing I'll say is, if you know someone with a hearing aid who's struggling on the phone, first of all, they can get an amplified phone subsidized by the fees that we all pay all the time on our phone bills. So we're always paying this fee that helps subsidize phones for people who have a hard time hearing. So there's an application in the state of Wisconsin. It's called, if you Google TEP, T-E-P-P, and you can just print it out or fill it out online, and it will either subsidize a phone for most cost, or it will pay for the entire thing, depending on the self-identified degree of hearing loss. So it's TEP, T-E-P-P, telecommunication something. And that, oh yeah, with the TEP application, great. So the case managers can help with that. And that will provide a nice amplified phone, sometimes even those phones that will show the words so they caption the phone calls. Captioning is great. Sometimes it goes a little fast. That's the tricky part, but it's great for TV too. There's even apps you can get that can caption cell phone calls. But so there's phones you can get that are louder. And then if you're using a device, one thing I'd say is pay attention to where the microphones are. This is my biggest functional tip. So some of those hearing aids have the microphones on top of the ear, which seems weird because we hear here normally. So we're all really used to holding the phone to our ear. But if you have a hearing aid with microphones up here, you might hear better if you move the receiver up to the top of your ear or use speakerphone. So I would say experiment a little. I would say play with the position of the phone. And then there might be, if you work with someone and you wear a hearing device, there's some ways that you can get hearing aids to communicate directly with the phone with something called a telecoil. So there's other ways to set phones up too. That's a really good question. Really functional question. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions before we wrap it up? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have a business card for your office or bring up your website again?
Yeah, and I know the next slide is actually through Badger Talks. Oh, Ben? There we go. So that's Badger Talks. Can you go to the very beginning with our, it was one of the first ones with the clinic website. Yeah. Thank you. He's so much faster than me. The next slide after that. So that's our clinic website for, yep, there we go. He's so fast. Good. Thank you. Much better than me. So that's, sorry if it's hard to see, I can leave it up. That's our clinic. We have a front desk person. She's wonderful. You can call and schedule appointments with our audiologist. Like I said, there's no charge for a hearing test at our clinic. So if you just want to come in and learn more about what you hear, it's a really great place to start. And you know, the side benefit is you're helping in a teaching clinic as well with our students. I will say we are quite busy. So I think we have some openings starting at the end of June, maybe early July, which is sooner than some clinics in town, but it's still a tiny bit of a wait next month. Yeah. And we see, even though the students are on break, we see people with technology year round at our clinic if they have problems or concerns, but we tend to see new people starting when the students are back. Well, thank you so much. It's been really fun talking with you all today.
Thank you. I'm going to make a couple of announcements. Thank you so much. Let's give her another round of applause. This was so informative. Thank you. Just so you know, we do have another Badger Talks presentation that's coming up in July. We have a colleague from UW-Madison coming. It is Dr. Bodemer, who is a dermatologist, who's going to be coming and talking about skin health for older adults. So I hope you can make that. That's going to be on Thursday, July 17th. So we really enjoy having the Badger Talks programs here. What a wealth of knowledge and expertise we have right at our back door. So we're really glad to have them come and speak to us. Thank you so much for coming today. If you have any questions, feel free to stop, but I hope to see you at our next program. Thanks. Yep.
Thank you. I'll tell you, I'm returning from Badger Talks after 11.